Picture this. It's 1949. World War II is over, America's booming, and everyone's driving these massive, sluggish boats with straight 8 engines that sound impressive but move like molasses. Then out of nowhere, Oldsmobile drops this bomb called the Rocket 88, and suddenly everything changes. I'm talking about the engine that literally invented the muscle car formula 20 years before anyone even knew what a muscle car was. This is the story of how a 303 cubic inch V8 from Lansing, Michigan became the king of NASCAR, shocked the entire automotive industry, and created a blueprint that every muscle car would follow for decades. And trust me, this story's got more twists than a mountain highway. Now, before we dive into this rocket ship, let me set the scene for you. 1949 America was a completely different world. Most cars were still running these long-stroke, flathead engines or straight eights that were about as modern as a telegraph machine. I mean, we're talking about engines with side valves, low compression ratios, and power outputs that would make a modern lawnmower laugh. The typical family car was making maybe 90 to 110 horsepower if you were lucky, and that's gross horsepower, mind you. General Motors knew they needed to do something revolutionary, and honestly, I think they had no idea just how revolutionary it was going to be. See, each division was working on their own overhead valve V8 design. Cadillac had been first to the party in '49 with their 331, but that was for their luxury cars. Oldsmobile? They were about to change everything. The genius behind the Rocket wasn't just that it was an overhead valve V8, though that was huge, it was the entire package. And this is where I get excited, because this is engineering at its finest. They took this brand new 303 cubic inch V8, and instead of stuffing it into their biggest, heaviest car like everyone expected, they put it in their smallest chassis. I'm talking about the 76 series body, which was originally designed for their straight 6 engine. Let me break down these specs for you because they're beautiful. The Rocket V8 displaced 303 cubic inches with a bore of 3.75 inches and a stroke of 3.4375 inches. Now that stroke measurement might not mean much to you, but it was revolutionary. This was what we call a short stroke design, which was the complete opposite of what everyone else was doing. Most engines back then had really long strokes, sometimes over 4 inches, which meant they couldn't rev very high and made all their power down low. But Oldsmobile's engineers, they were thinking ahead. They realized that with a shorter stroke and bigger bore, you could rev higher, breathe better, and make more power per cubic inch. The engine was one of the first modern short-stroke, high-compression overhead valve V8s. And when I say high compression, we're talking about ratios around 7.25 to 1, which doesn't sound like much today, but in 1949, that was space-age stuff. The result? 135 horsepower and 283 pound-feet of torque. Now, I know what you're thinking. 135 horsepower. My Honda Civic makes more than that. But remember, this is 1949. The competition was making 100 horsepower on a good day, so this was like bringing a machine gun to a knife fight. But here's where it gets really interesting, and this is something I find absolutely fascinating about automotive history. The Rocket 88 wasn't supposed to be a performance car. Oldsmobile was planning to put this engine in their heavy 98 series cars, the luxury barges. But somewhere along the line, some brilliant engineer or marketing guy, and I'd love to know who it was, had this crazy idea. What if we put this big engine in our smallest car? And that's exactly what they did. The new car used the same new A-body platform as the straight 6-engined 76, but paired it with the company's new 303 cubic inch, 135 horsepower V8. And the result was automotive alchemy. You had this relatively lightweight body, and I'm talking maybe 3,400 pounds, which was light for 1949, with an engine that was making 35 to 40% more power than anything else on the road. The performance numbers were absolutely bonkers for the time. The '49 model had a top speed of 97 miles per hour and a 0 to 60 miles per hour time of 13 seconds, giving it sports car performance in a straight line with all the usability of a family car. 13 seconds to 60 might sound terrible by today's standards, but in 1949, that was Ferrari territory. Most family cars were lucky to hit 60 in 18-20 seconds. And here's what really gets me going. This wasn't just about straight-line performance. The Rocket V8 was compact and lightweight compared to the straight-eights it replaced. It had better weight distribution, and it just transformed the way these cars drove. I've driven a few of these old Rockets, and there's something magical about the way they feel. You've got this smooth, torquey V8 that doesn't feel strained like those old flatheads did. Now, let's talk about what really put the Rocket 88 on the map. And this is where the story gets really wild, because NASCAR was just getting started in 1949, same year as the Rocket 88. Talk about perfect timing. In 1949, the first year of the strictly stock division, the 88 helped Red Byron win 5 of 8 and get his hands on the trophy. 5 out of 8. That's a 62.5% win rate in the first year of NASCAR's top division. But that was just the beginning. It won 6 of the 9 NASCAR late model division races in 1949, 10 of 19 in 1950. I mean, these numbers are just staggering. Overall, the 88 won more than half of the races it entered from 1949 to 1951, becoming the first king of NASCAR. And here's what I love about this era. These were literally stock cars. I'm not talking about the purpose-built race cars we have today with just the body shape resembling a street car. These were actual production cars, with maybe some safety equipment thrown in. The Rocket V8 that was dominating on Sunday was the same engine you could buy on Monday at your local Oldsmobile dealer. The motto of the day became, "Win on Sunday, sell on Monday." And boy, did that formula work for Oldsmobile. The racing success translated directly into sales success. People saw these cars winning races and thought, "I want one of those." It was probably the first time in automotive history where racing performance directly influenced mass-market car sales in such a dramatic way. But here's what impresses me. The Rocket 88's NASCAR dominance is how it changed the entire industry. The Oldsmobile was an immediate success in 1949 and 1950, and all the automobile manufacturers could not help noticing the higher sales of the Oldsmobile 88 to the buying public. Suddenly, everyone realized they needed their own high-performance V8. Ford started working on their Y-block, Chrysler developed their Hemi, and Chevrolet was scrambling to catch up with what would eventually become the small block. The Rocket 88 literally created the American horsepower race. Before 1949, horsepower wasn't really a selling point for most manufacturers. After the Rocket's success, every car company was advertising their power figures and trying to one-up the competition. Sound familiar? That's because this pattern repeated itself in the muscle car era of the 60s and 70s. Now, let me tell you about the technical innovations that made this possible, because the Rocket wasn't just powerful, it was advanced. The overhead valve design allowed for much better breathing than the old flathead engines. The combustion chambers were more efficient, the valves were bigger, and the whole setup could handle higher compression ratios. But here's something most people don't know. The Rocket V8 was actually designed to be scalable. Oldsmobile engineers knew they could easily increase displacement by boring it out or stroking it, and that's exactly what they did over the years. The original 303 eventually grew into 324s, 371s, 394s, and eventually the monster 455s of the late 60s and early 70s. It was like they had designed the perfect foundation for 2 decades of performance development. And speaking of development, let me share a personal observation here. I've worked on quite a few of these early rockets, and there's something about the build quality that you just don't see anymore. These engines were built like tanks. The blocks were thick, the internals were robust, and they were designed to last. General Motors knew they were going to be racing these things, so they over-engineered them from the start. One thing that always amazes me is how this engine influenced popular culture, too. It inspired the rock and roll classic, penned by Ike Turner. Rocket 88 is often cited as one of the first true rock and roll songs, recorded in 1951. So not only did this engine create the muscle car, it helped create rock and roll, too. How's that for cultural impact? But let's get back to the technical side for a moment, because there's something really important to understand about why the rocket was so successful. It wasn't just the power, though that was impressive. It was the entire package. The engine was mated to GM's Hydromatic automatic transmission, which was light years ahead of the competition in terms of smoothness and reliability. Most other manufacturers were still using manual transmissions or really primitive automatics. The combination of the powerful, smooth V8 and the advanced automatic transmission created this effortless driving experience that people had never experienced before. You could just put your foot down and feel this wave of torque pushing you forward without having to shift gears or deal with a lumpy idle. It was luxury and performance combined in a way that nobody had seen before. Now, here's where I get a little controversial, but I think it needs to be said. A lot of people credit the 1964 GTO as the first muscle car. And I get why. It was the first car specifically marketed as a muscle car with that big engine, small car formula. But honestly, the Rocket 88 was doing that exact same thing 15 years earlier. The 88 might have been named the first muscle car before the term was even invented, but it ticked all the boxes. You had a large, powerful engine in a smaller, lighter chassis specifically designed for performance. You had racing success validating the concept. You had young buyers flocking to dealerships. You had a car that looked good, went fast, and didn't cost a fortune. That's the muscle car formula right there, and Oldsmobile figured it out in 1949. The only thing different was the marketing. In 1949, Oldsmobile wasn't necessarily targeting young hot rodders. That market didn't really exist yet. But the young buyers found the cars anyway, and Oldsmobile was smart enough to lean into it. They started advertising the racing success, the performance numbers, and the style. They were building the template that would define American performance cars for decades. And let's talk about that influence for a second, because it's huge. Every muscle car that came after the Rocket 88 followed the same basic formula. Take your most powerful engine, put it in your lightest chassis, and watch the magic happen. The GTO, the 442, the Chevelle SS, the Roadrunner, they were all variations on the theme that Oldsmobile invented with the Rocket 88. So here's the bottom line. The Oldsmobile Rocket 88 V8 wasn't just the first true muscle car engine, it was the engine that changed everything. It proved that Americans wanted performance in their daily drivers. It created the template that every muscle car would follow. It started the horsepower race that defined American automotive culture for decades, and it did all of this in 1949, 20 years before anyone even knew what a muscle car was supposed to be. The next time someone tells you the GTO was the first muscle car, you tell them about the Rocket 88, because while Pontiac might have coined the term, Oldsmobile wrote the playbook, and that playbook is still being used today. Every time a manufacturer drops their biggest engine into their smallest chassis and calls it a performance car. What do you think? Did I miss anything about the Rocket 88's legacy? Drop a comment below and let me know what other forgotten performance engines you'd like me to cover. And if you enjoyed learning about this piece of automotive history, hit that subscribe button because we've got plenty more engine stories to tell. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.